Now, I'm sure you've heard the story that America was discovered in 1492. That's what they tell you. That's what they teach in schools. And they even have Columbus Day, a very special day to celebrate. But what if I told you that the narrative wasn't always that? What if I told you that the narrative used to be that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1592? And I'm going to prove that to you today. I'm going to show you evidence after evidence. There's so much evidence that it's undeniable that something has happened here to change history. So, welcome back to another episode of Old World USA with me, your host, Tom Johnson. Now, first things first, Christopher Columbus wasn't even his real name. He's known as Cristoforo Colombo, but his real name was Expur de Colon. That was his real name. So how that became Columbus, we'll never know. But we do know how the name colony came from that, don't we? Because he was a colonizer. But let's find out when he really came to America. Let's have a look at this map, which was created in 1652. Very impressive map for the time. Look, most of America has been easily discovered by this point. Look at that. Lots of cities as well around the side that supposedly didn't exist yet, but we won't get into that today. But what we'll notice if we come to the top here, it has a nice bit of Latin for us. And we can see something quite strange, a J592 right there. So what does this actually say? Well, we can see the name Christopher Colombo. It actually says, America was first discovered by Christopher Columbus in J592. But it was discovered more widely by Americo Vespuccio in J599. So very clearly this map, which was an official map, imagine how much this map would have cost to make. Would have been very expensive, supposedly produced in 1652. And what does it say? That Columbus discovered America in 1592. Now, interestingly, they get the dates right for everybody else. So they talk about Ferdinand Magellan, who discovers in 1520, the Magellan Strait down here. So that gets that correct, and all the other names as well, because it names a series of people. It names Francis Draco, which obviously Francis Drake, Thomas Candish, Olivierus of Naught, Sebastian de Witt. So they know all the people, and they've got all these correct. Everything's correct, but the only two that are different are Americo Vespuccio and Christopher Columbus. So these dates have been changed, because as you'll notice, Americo Vespuccio supposedly came in 1499, and Columbus was 1492. But that doesn't make sense with this narrative. I know people are going to say, Tom, maybe they've just made a mistake. Just a mistake on a map. And possibly, could be. But I would say this to you. It's a pretty expensive mistake to make. Don't you think? This map would have been copied and reproduced. I mean, it's on David Rumsey. Copies of this map will be selling for thousands of dollars today. And it has this glaring error. And do not think that at some point during the writing of this section, somebody might have said, wait a minute, no, how could it have been 1592 if the Magellan Strait was 1520? How would that make sense? Surely the person writing this would have clocked on as he was writing the other dates, wait a minute, I've made a terrible mistake. Because there's no way that they would leave that kind of mistake on there. Somebody would have seen it. Somebody would have said, Ian, come here. You've done a terrible thing, Ian. I told you to put 1492 and 1499, and look what you've done. You've ruined my map. The king's going to kill me. But apparently not. Nobody brought it up, and people still don't talk about it today. David Rumsey describes it by saying the error of the date of 1592 for the discovery of America by Columbus indicates that this is a very early state of the map, perhaps the first. So they're trying to insinuate that the map hadn't been edited yet. So it's just an early version. Don't worry about the fact that it says 1592. It's just an early version of the map. Does it look like an early version? Does this look to you like it's early? It's not finished yet. It's not finished, can't you tell? These aren't finished. None of it's finished. That's just a mistake because it's not finished. Absolutely ridiculous, the lies that they tell us to get away from this, because obviously it's a hole in their story. But sure, you're going to be saying, one map cannot prove that Columbus discovered it in 1592. I also found this description from a book talking about that map. It just says that the maps are signed by the engraver, Peter Goose, which to me would insinuate that they were finished. And it says an error in the cartouche placed above North America describes America as first discovered by Columbus in 1592 and subsequently by Vespucci in 1599. So what about this book, which is 1736? But here our author puts me in mind of the companions of Christopher Columbus, who first discovered America about the year 1592, or I-592, depending on the way you want to see that. But that's quite strange, isn't it? There's a book that's saying that 1592 is when Columbus and his friends discovered America. So this book is from 1714, and once again we can see Christopher Columbus, who first discovered America about the year 1592. So what about this one from 1791, the General Gazetteer, or Compendious Geographical Dictionary? And what does it say right here? St. Domingo, an island of America. It was first discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1592. This is clearly a terrible mistake by the narrator. He doesn't want to know his story is a pack of lies. So the question is, when does this change? Now this one from 1651, it doesn't actually give us a date, a specific date for when Columbus discovered it. But remember, it's from 1651, and it's talking about America, and it says, "Which yours sure was not to those nations which were lately discovered by Columbus." Lately discovered. Now 1492 is not exactly last week, when you're writing in 1651. But that's 159 years. Whereas if this had taken place in 1592, like we're suggesting, like the rest of these documents are suggesting, that implied only been 59 years, which is a lot more likely to be described as lately. Lately discovered by Columbus would imply 1592. This is written in 1651. So let's have a look in this book. This one is called Sir William Monson's Naval Tracts, and it's from 1703. And if we come to this page 389, you can see down here it says, "The West Indies, and especially the islands of Lucaos, were discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1592. So once again, the West Indies were discovered by Columbus in 1592. This is a book called The Proceedings of the Nova Scotian Institute of Science. It was released in 1866. In 1720, a prize was offered for the best way of determining longitude at sea. Columbus, in 1592, had first suggested using the lines of equal declination for determining longitudes, but Gilbert, who published his great work in 1600, proposed to determine longitude by variations in the angle of dip. Now, evidently, these are close dates because they make sense, whereas Columbus isn't going to be around in 1592, is he? Because he went in 1492, according to the official narrative. So Columbus could not have been here in 1592. But of course it's talking about 1592 because that's when he really discovered America, so to speak. And we can see, of course, that De Magnete is a book that was originally published in 1600 by Gilbert. So they accept that Gilbert was in the 1600s, but they won't accept that Columbus was around in 1592. So this is a Dutch book by Johann Hubner, 1769. As you can see, it's in Dutch, but it's talking about America, Asia, Africa, etc. And if we come to this page, we can see, once again, it says, the island of Guanahania was the first discovered by Columbus in 1592. So there's another island discovered by Columbus in 1592. The Travels of a Naturalist from 1894. So this book was printed in London, 1894, but I believe it was a translation. But what do we see once again? Down here, and I'm actually going to read this whole thing because it's quite interesting. The Reverend Father Charlevoix thinks that Noah himself landed in America. Old Spanish authors were of the opinion that the fleet which brought a rich cargo of gold to Palestine in the year 996 before Christ had come direct from the island of Santo Domingo, the same island that Christopher Colon discovered in 1592, and of which he thought was the offer of Solomon. So there you go, Christopher Columbus himself in 1592, so there's the important bit of course, but he believed he discovered an island in which gold had been sent to Palestine 996 years before Christ, and that Noah himself had possibly landed in America. But even with that interesting extra information, the most important thing is this is another source that says 1592. So evidently when they've been compiling this book, they've just grabbed the documents. They've forgotten to change the date. They've grabbed the documents to do with Santo Domingo, just as they've done with the other ones, because I'm reckoning that these are documents that are stored in archives. So they've gone to the local places, they've grabbed the documents, they've not thought about it, they've gone 1592, that's correct. And then later on they've gone, oh no, it was supposed to be 1492, we forgot to change the date. So that's what I think is going on here. So Santo Domingo, these are all, notice how they've all been independent islands as well, different places. They say discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1592, this island was discovered by Christopher Columbus. It's very specific. There's got to be true. So I decided to start looking into newspaper articles. I thought maybe we could find something here, so I came to the Library of Congress. And guess what? Down here we can find a poem written about Columbus, and it's called Columbus 1592. So again, this must be an old world poem that slipped through the cracks, because this was 1918. So by this point they've established when Columbus went. I believe that it might have actually been established at the World's Fair, the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, because that's when Columbus Day was invented. We can see on the fieldmuseum.org, the official website for the Field Museum that was included in the Chicago World's Fair. We saw this in my Chicago video. It does say the Columbian Exposition was held to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus landing. However, instead of opening in 1892, it opened 1 year later. A new national holiday, Columbus Day, was one result of the fair's popularity. So notice that it became a national holiday to remind everyone that it was 1492, not 1592. So just in case you were confused. So I'm wondering if this might be a residue of the Civil War. So this is definitely residue from that. This is a Columbus poem that says 1592, the original story. So we'll see another one, shall we? This one's from 1877. And down here in geography, it says, question, when and by whom was America discovered, why so called? The answer, in 1592 by Christ Columbus, and named after America Vespucci, the Spaniard. So, again, 1592, Christopher Columbus. And of course they mention Americus Vespucci again, but they're calling him Vespucci, the Spaniard, but 1592. So this next one is from 1861, the Daily Exchange from Baltimore. And down here we can see the history of San Domingo is the history of nearly all the Spanish possessions on this continent. Discovered by Columbus in 1592 and claimed and held by the right of discovery. So, again, 1592. It was continued under the exclusive jurisdiction of Spain until 1697, when the western part of it, that which is now styled Haiti, was ceded by the Treaty of Ryswick to France. And the remaining two-thirds were a Spanish colony until 1785, when again they went to France. So 1592, discovered by Columbus. Another newspaper from 1859. Down here we see Cuba. Cuba was discovered by Columbus on the 28th of October 1592. He first named the island Juana. It was afterwards called Fernandina, and then Santiago. Cuba, discovered by Columbus, 28th of October 1592. And then this article is from Washington, D.C. in 1851, and it says down here, Cuba. Some of the newspapers are busy in displaying the charms and lauding the treasures of this beautiful island, while they are eloquent in deploring its fate under the withering power of tyranny. They tell us very gravely that it was discovered by Columbus in 1592, and that all its original inhabitants have been exterminated. So once again, they tell us very gravely that Columbus discovered it in 1592 and all of the inhabitants have been killed. But 1592, again. Now this article says a picture of Columbus in the year 1774. Somebody from New York wrote to somebody else offering a picture of Columbus, which had been copied in the year 1592. And it says it had been copied from an original painting and had been in her family for 150 years. The date is marked on the picture as 1592. So of course it's a picture of Columbus from 1592. Why wouldn't it be? Because that's the real date that he discovered America. It was not 1492. I'm going to bring your attention to something that's quite strange. You see, in some of the later newspapers, as time goes on, they start to insert Columbus next to the number 1592 in very curious places. It's almost like they're trying to muddy the waters. So this little snippet is just talking about the budget that they're going to use to build an iron bridge across the feeder on Columbus Street. So they're going to build an iron bridge, and the exact sum is $1,592.30. So very curious that they used the exact figure. Why wouldn't they just round that up? Very specific. Another strange occurrence of Columbus appearing next to 1592. Very curious, the exact amount of votes was 1592 for Columbus. And this is in 1914, so I believe this is them muddying the water for future people so that they won't be able to find information. You know, if you go searching for Columbus 1592 in the archives, you'll just get pulled a load of this nonsense. Once again, the first 13 leaders of this all got different votes, and John Mueller of Columbus got exactly 1592. This one's talking about the son of a doctor who just so happens to live at 1592 East Broad Street, Columbus, and was killed in an automobile accident, so they had to print that, of course, just muddying the waters. Now look at this one, presidential votes in 1888 for president. Columbus, 1592. Now you might be thinking, that just looks exactly the same as the other one, but believe it or not, it's actually different. You can see this is the official returns of the vote for United States Senator and Corporation Commissioner. U.S. Overman, Columbus 1592. What are the chances? And you can see that Cleveland does not have the same numbers, because if we just look back at that image, we can see Cleveland's numbers here, 1960, 1064, or 1960, 1061. Notice 1592 in the Columbus section, and over in this one, Columbus again with 1592. So the exact same number, because they have to have Columbus next to the number 1592 to muddy those waters in case you go hunting through the archives. And notice this in sales as well. They're talking about how many things have been sold, different things. Albion, 7,000 sold at this much, for example. Big Four, 1,900 at 25 cents. Columbus Rexall, 500 at 110 and 1592. Notice how that's the only number that's specific. All the others are kind of rounded. 500, 2,100, 300. They're rounded to the hundreds. But this one, for some reason, in Columbus has to be 1592. Yet all the other numbers are all rounded. Very strange indeed. Because like I've said, they're trying to muddy the waters. Because they don't want you looking at this, they don't want you seeing the truth. Now, if you're asking yourself, why have they changed this? Well, that's the question. But this might offer us a possible motive. Because I found this on the New York Public Library digital collections. It's a type of playing card from an old game, and it was issued in 1677. So this was a card game from 1677. It's talking about America. We've got a little map. So this is what they knew of America in 1677, which makes sense if it was only discovered in 1592, don't you think? They've only discovered this much. It talks about America, divided into two peninsulas, north and south. And it says, this part was to the honour of our nation, first discovered by Maddox, son to Owen Gwyneth, and afterward by Sebastian Cabot, at the charge of King Henry VII. So it's very curious that they're saying that America was actually discovered first by Maddox, which of course the journeys they claim to be in the 1100s, and afterwards by Sebastian Cabot. So no mention at all of Christopher Columbus, so I do wonder if this is because Columbus came much later. And then they've changed the story to say Columbus was first. In fact, if you go to Mobile Bay in Alabama, you can actually find this monument that says, in memory of Prince Maddox, a Welsh explorer who landed in Mobile Bay in 1170 and left behind with the Indians the Welsh language. Let's look at this book, which comes from 1700. Florida was first discovered by the English under the conduct of Sebastian Cabot in 1479. So look at that. That's saying in 1479, Sebastian Cabot discovered America, which would be before 1492. So maybe Columbus didn't really discover America at all in 1492. Maybe he just came across in 1592 and took control of a couple of islands. He colonized some islands, which was not nice. People didn't approve. But he said, nope, I don't care. I'm bringing Christianity here in the name of the Catholic Church. So that seems to be what happened there, because Sebastian Cabot, 1479. Another book that seems to claim the same thing, talking about Florida, this country first discovered by Sebastian Cabot in 1497. A bit of a change on the date this time, 1497 instead of 1479, but more particularly afterwards by John de Pony, a Spaniard who took possession thereof in the name of his Catholic Majesty in 1527. So it seems the Spanish have come afterwards, the Spanish have come to take this area afterwards, you see. But it's very strange because official history tells us that this was the person who made the first discovery of Florida, and he did so in about 1513. He's the first European to discover Florida, even though we've seen evidence that he's not. So, I think I've proven pretty conclusively that Columbus discovered America in 1592. I'm not sure exactly why they've chosen to lie. There are many possibilities, many nefarious reasons. But the main point is, they have lied, and we've exposed them. So please, if you can help me share this video and get the truth out there, I'd really appreciate it. We need more voices, more people involved in this project so that we can get to the bottom of this. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. And leave a comment down below as well, it helps the algorithm, it's all great. But make sure you share this video far and wide. If you don't, there's a very big chance I'll be taken out by the security services. I've been Tom Johnson, your host, and this is Old World USA.